Welcome to Right Woman Right. And I'm Donna Barker, your host for this conversation with Linda Strader, who is the author of the upcoming memoir called Summers of Fire, a memoir of adventure, love, and courage. And Linda, I loved hearing about Linda's story, maybe in part because I could feel a little bit of a connection. Linda was a forest fire firefighter, right? Is that how you would say it?
Yes, a forest firefighter.
A forest firefighter. Let's see, there should be another fire in there. So a forest firefighter, and that's something that I've had the opportunity. I was going to say, I don't know. I actually loved doing it, and I imagine you loved doing it too. I've as a volunteer firefighter, got to fight 2 forest fires in my small community. And when I heard that you had done this for a number of summers as a career, it was just like, what a wonderful story. So I am thrilled to be able to share your story of how you came to be the author of this memoir. And I just want to dive in. So you are traditionally published, and I would love for you to tell the story about how it is that you came to get your memoir traditionally published.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, that was a long haul. I started out with agent query. I wanted agent representation, and I was encouraged by fellow authors and in my writers group to pursue that first. Go for the big guys. Go to the top. And if that doesn't work, then you can work your way down to, small publishers. I have always, though, been adamant that I would never self-publish. I realize there are a lot of good self-published books out there, but there are a lot of bad ones. And I did not want anyone to ever say to me, "Oh, you couldn't get published, so you did it yourself."
Right. That
Never.
stigma, I guess.
Never.
Right.
Yeah, never. And so I started the agent querying, and I did it when, my book was done. I'd completed it to the end, but it was still a work in progress. But at the same time, I felt like, well, it takes so long to get responses from agents. I didn't see a problem that I was still tweaking in the editing.
Mm-hmm.
And there really wasn't. And I'm glad I did it that way, because otherwise you could be, it sometimes it takes 6 months to hear from an agent.
Right.
So I queried, and I queried a bunch of them at the start, and I was getting the form rejection letters. Thank you, but it's not right. It's not a good fit, or we aren't looking for memoirs right now, or memoirs are really hard to sell. I heard that one a lot.
Yeah.
But then every now and then I would get one that was personal, and it would say, "Oh, the first chapter just didn't grab me."
Oh.
I paid attention to those because
Yeah.
I thought, okay, what's wrong with the first chapter? I better look at that. So I can't tell you how many times I changed the first chapter between the second and the third, and back and forth, and where's the best place to start my story? And maybe it's not at the beginning of my career. And actually, it ended up not being at the beginning. I actually started my story in the middle of my first forest fire.
Wow.
And that started generating some responses. Oh, yeah, we want to see more. So I started getting, requests for full manuscripts, but they still turned me down. And, it's always hard to get rejected. But I was so focused, I thought, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to make this book right. And if an agent is turning it down, there's something not right.
So tell me, how is it that you figured out to start the story in the middle of your first forest fire season? Like, were you just inspired, or did you get some feedback that said start with action?
I got feedback that said start with action. And that is the very initial, that is the very exciting thing that happens. And it wasn't until, well, I can't tell you how many times I've rewritten this book. I've rewritten this book like dozens of times.
Yeah.
But
let me just back up.
And I was very, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how long ago did you start writing it?
4 years.
Okay, only 4 years.
It's been 4 years.
Okay, well done to write it that
Oh
many
yeah, I know.
times in 4 years. That's focus.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I started I started probably running it 5 years ago, but I was dabbling. I wasn't really writing a book. I was just kind of documenting some things and playing around. But what I found out was that I wrote a journal faithfully daily from when I was 16 until my 30s.
Wow.
And at first I was writing my book from memory. And then I got out my journals just because I think, oh, I forgot I wonder what I said. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there is so much here. Whoa, wait a minute, I need to back up. Because I had this wonderful story all written in my journal already of events. And one of the things that I had totally forgotten is that my first fire happened 2 weeks after my first day on the job.
Holy cow.
And I just finished fire training. We had just completed fire training, and I get a 5 a.m. wake up call. We got a fire, and I'm like, we do? It's like, oh my God, am I ready for this?
Yeah.
So I realized that's an excellent place to start. And then I go through take everybody through that, and then go back to, so how did I get here?
Right.
Kind of thing. And that generated a lot of responses from agents. And at the same time, and I'm going to tell you, I queried over 200 agents in 4 years. Wow. But it wasn't until...
Tell me this then.
I rewrote the book a year ago last summer. I just, all of a sudden, I realized I need to revisit everything. And I actually set aside the original, completely rewrote the beginning, just based on instinct of what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. And then went back and brought back in the parts that I thought were okay. That rewrite, I only queried 50 agents before I started getting all kinds of interest. So I figured I'd done something right.
Right. Yeah.
And at the same time, I queried publishers. I figured, what the heck?
Why not? And so how many publishers did you query then?
I have the records. I haven't tallied that up. And I think the 200 was total. Okay. Agents and publishers.
And in the end, you have gone with a publisher.
I went with a small publisher.
Right.
And this is what was kind of interesting, is that last year in December, I had so many people interested. I had 3 agents reading the whole manuscript. I think there were 3 or 4 publishers that wanted the whole manuscript, and they were all reading them at the same time. And I'm thinking, and then I would get, oh, well, and I'm like, well, where do I go? I still want agent representation. Mm. And so in the midst of all that, I get an offer from a publisher. And I had 3 full manuscripts out to 3 agents. And I'm thinking, do I take this or do I wait? And so I asked the publisher, I told them, I really want agent representation. I have 3 manuscripts out. Would you be willing to wait? And how long? And they said, we will wait. We will give you 2 months.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, that is extremely generous.
That sounds very generous, yeah.
And I was like, oh, thank you. I will let you know the minute I know. And of course, wouldn't you know that, one agent shortly passed after that. The other one said, I need more time. And she needed more time. And she actually told me the day before my 2-month deadline was up that I need more time. And in the same week, I had another small, medium-sized publisher in New York City say, we are really interested.
Okay, so I'm on the edge of my seat. So what happened?
Well, so I actually told the first publisher that made me the offer that I would pass.
Wow, that's gutsy.
Oh God, did that. I was shaking, and I told them what was going on. I said, I'm waiting. I didn't tell them about the other publisher. I just told them about the agent. And they said, well, no worries. We're still interested in your book. So you can always resubmit, requery us if
Yeah.
you don't sign a contract. And I thought, okay. So I said no. And the agent passed. And the publisher, that a medium-sized publisher in New York City who publishes, I mean, I can name some titles that you probably recognize of who they've published. And I was just like, oh, I so want to be in on this. They were really interested. And then they told me a week later, darn, somebody else in our department already signed on a memoir that's too much like yours. I wanted to kill them. So that was a Saturday that they said, and we're going to pass as well. And I was so depressed. I got up Sunday morning. I went hiking thinking, what the hell did I just do? And I had an email from another publisher saying, we'd like to make an offer.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. That's fantastic. Wow.
And I signed on.
Wow. Okay. So what kind of process did you go through once you got the publisher?
Well, they asked me for, they said, do you have any ideas of a book cover? And I said, well, actually, I do. And I actually, I've been thinking about it. And they said, well, we'll work with you on that. Send us what you think. I actually dove in. I had a collage of firefighting photos in mind, maybe an image of one of my journal. I had my journal in one of them that actually says, my first fire. I went to my first fire today. And memorabilia kind of scattered around. And they liked it, but they said, well, we want to kind of simplify that. And I said, that's fine. And so it took a little bit of, back and forth. And there was a lot of silence on their part for a while, which was very frustrating. This is the traditional publishing world, and
okay, so 4 years. And how long, I mean, just a little bit more about your story. How long were you a forest firefighter?
I worked for the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management for 7 years, 7 summers.
Which state was that?
I traveled a lot. I spent three years in Arizona. Then I took a job in Flagstaff. So I was in Southern Arizona. Then I went to Flagstaff. Then I went to Alaska.
Wow.
And Durango, and then back down to Southern Arizona.
And so were you going where the fires were?
I was going where the jobs were. And actually, the way the Forest Service worked and the Bureau of Land Management worked back then for summer employment is that you would submit an application and you couldn't tell them where you wanted to work. You just submitted an application in general, and you would get on a roster, and then you would get a call from whoever was hiring and saw your name and picked you. That changed down the road where you could kind of focus your application to where you wanted to be, which is how I ended up in Alaska. I really wanted to work in Alaska. And there were a couple jobs that were not necessarily firefighting, but I still went to fires anyway. And my book, explains how that all came about. And it was like this, like, oh, well, I guess I'm doing this.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced writing this as writing a memoir? Like, so there are lots of women specifically that I work with, many of them working on memoirs, and there are places where they get stuck. Were there any places that you got stuck writing your memoir, and how did you push past that?
I got very stuck because the reality is that my memoir takes place. It starts with my first fire season, but it comes up to present day. It comes up to some very tough times in present day. And the parts, and I ended up getting a divorce from someone that I married that I met on my first fire. Writing about him was, I just didn't. And it was my writers group that said, we can tell you're leaving something out here, because I just tippy-toed around our relationship. I show our relationship and how it blossoms while we're together. But one of my wonderful early readers, who was a man who actually because a lot of this is a love story. He was really insightful. And he said, the story is great, but I can tell that you are avoiding talking about your ex and you're going to have to go there. And he was right.
He was, eh?
And that was one of the most painful things that I've ever done. Because I had to write about falling in love with this guy, even though I wasn't anymore.
Did you?
It's really hard to make people feel what you're feeling when you're not feeling it anymore. And when they've hurt you and you are feeling, I am just actually still recovering from all of that. So from the divorce and everything. And so writing about us falling in love in our relationship and how, and where it went and then what happened in it, there were days where I had to just get up and walk away from the computer. I had to abandon the story or abandon that part and just, or put what I call place markers in. I'm going to stick this in there. That's not what happened. And it's not how I felt, but I can't deal with this right now.
Right.
I have read I've read about a lot of people who have written memoirs and read memoirs that are about dealing with trauma and how they thought it was cathartic. Oh, I finally worked it out and I feel so much better. I never felt better writing about this. And I've written a couple of articles on that for warning people, if you think that writing your memoir and telling about all the traumatic things that happened to you is going to somehow make them go away or make things better, it may not. I still can't go back to 2 weeks ago when I had to go back and make some edits for the final draft. I was I thought I wouldn't have to go there again,
Right.
So it's tough. And when you're writing about things that are very, very personal and very emotional, there's a fine line between bringing the reader into what is happening with you and burdening them with garbage that they don't want to read. Some people don't want to hear that. There's just there's a fine line. I don't want to hear that. It triggers something in them. That was extremely difficult.
And okay, so the two questions: did you struggle at all with thinking about how your ex would react or feel if he read this?
That I don't care.
Good for you.
And I say some pretty negative things about other people in there and about the Forest Service in general who didn't treat me very well. I don't care because this is what happened. I don't trash people. I just say what happened and let everybody else figure out how to react to that. To me, a long time ago, I read a blog post about what someone else said concerning that topic. And she said, if people don't like what I wrote about them, then maybe they should have been nicer to me. I just love that because, and I'm not making things up. Yeah, I don't have to. And so, no, I did not worry about that. And I don't care if he reads it. And I don't care if some of the other people in the stories balk and say, oh, how dare you? Well, nothing is defamation of character. Nothing is saying anything other than the truth that, yeah, you said that to me. And so what? And I had to make the big decision in this final draft. Do I change names of everybody? Because I'd already changed some names, but there were a couple that I was on the fence over. And I'm still in touch with these people. And I asked them, I said, okay, this is the deal. Do you want me to leave your name in there? Or would you rather I change it?
Yeah.
They said, no last names. I said, no last names. All right, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so given how challenging revisiting these pieces with your ex-husband was in the context of this story, and your early readers recognize that that's an important part of the story, why did you feel compelled to carry on and continue writing this book? Like, what is your why for writing this memoir?
My why. There are a lot of people that, and that's what my book was originally titled Just Summers of Fire, and then I realized I needed a subtitle because there's so much more to it than just firefighting. I'm 19 years old. I fall in love. I fall out of love. I am unsure of myself. I am not this gutsy, oh God, I'm gonna, make men look weak and I'm stronger than they are and I'm so tough. I wasn't. I was a young woman who loved my job and who had to face reality of I was a woman in a career that was not accepted for females. I
Mm-hmm.
was one of the first. Men did not know what the hell to do with me on the crew. I faced discrimination. I faced outright, I'm not hiring you. I faced derogatory comments, nasty remarks, and sexual innuendos. And at the time, I just laughed them off. I was like, what the hell's wrong with you? I can do this job. I've been doing it, so what's the deal?
Mm-hmm.
But I never thought of myself as courageous or brave. I just thought of myself as determined, and I wanted this job, and nobody's going to tell me I couldn't have this job. And then things get a little tougher,
Mm.
and I lose my job, and I lose my career. I lose everything that I wanted out of life. I get divorced. Everything gets really, really tough. And I go through a period where I don't think I'm going to make it.
Mm.
But so my message is, I figure it out. I realize that I'm tougher than I think I am. I realize that even now when I am in my 60s, that I'm still that strong-willed 20-year-old that said, I want to do this, and you're not going to tell me I can't. That was kind of and that was another part of the story that took a while to evolve. It was there, but I didn't know how to tap into it. It just came to me. Wait a minute. I am doing okay. And I'm still that 20-year-old inside who said, what do you mean I can't do this? I mean, you can't tell me that. I am a lot stronger than I thought I was. And I think we all are. And I hope that my story will make people realize, oh, wait a minute, I did that. Wow, that really is something to be proud of. I mean, I am stronger than I think I am.
Right. Lovely. That's so that is, I guess, the theme of the story is around having the strength.
Is having strength that you don't know is there. Yeah, and I took it for granted and assumed it's like, why wouldn't I? And actually, my ex and I went our first date. He is just so intimidated by me. He'd never met anyone like me, never had a girlfriend before. And I remember he took my hand and he ran his thumb over the calluses on my hand, my palm, and he said, I have never met anyone, much less a woman, that works as hard as you do. And I was thinking, well, that's sweet, but why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I work hard? And I was like,
you made a reference to your writing community, the gentleman who read your book and the other writers that you work with. How important was that writing community to you moving from having this idea of writing your book to actually about to have this book published in May, or having it published in May?
I started getting interested in publishing. And I asked my friends, I said, does anyone know an author here in my community that I could talk to? So I was introduced to a local author. She introduced me to a reporter from my local newspaper. And when she found out what my story was about, she said, oh, I want to write an article about you. So, wow, that's great. So she did. And then I ended up connecting with all kinds of people. I mean, I had the American Association of University Women asked me to come speak.
Okay, so wait a minute. You have written 90 pages of, and you weren't even planning particularly on writing a book at the start, and already you
I'm getting interested. So I start adding, and actually I went gung-ho. I actually added to 90 pages, I added 400. I mean, it was too long.
Yeah.
So when I got the interview, when I got the guest speaking and everybody was just fascinated with what I did. And so that kind of lit a spark. And then the local author I met encouraged me to sign up with our local writers group. And so I started attending. I attended those meetings weekly for a solid year and a half.
And what did you do in those meetings? What was the capacity of those folks to you?
This was all completely new to me. I have never written anything in my life other than a term paper and a short story for college. So I was just, whatever they told me, I knew I didn't have to make all the changes that they said. I mean, I knew that, but I would listen to their feedback. So what we got to do is that you get to read for 10 minutes and then you got a 5-minute critique. Everybody was just really, enthralled with my book. And in the meantime, I mean, this is how I ended up writing anything at all, is that I was writing professional articles online for examiner.com, which was a online magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to make money. I was unemployed at that time, and I didn't care. I was $1 here, $1 there. I was desperate to make money. And I met a woman in Tucson who was also writing for them. She liked to, because I was writing about gardening, and I was also writing about the Santa Rita Mountains, which is where I worked. And she connected with that. She was a retired English teacher.
Mm.
And in the same time that I'm joining this writing group, she's telling me, well, send me your manuscript. I'd love to see what you've got. So I sent it to her, and she says, this is really interesting. This is really great stuff, but I've got some suggestions. And the next thing I know, we're partners in this. And so she is helping me with writing, which I know nothing about. My writers group is telling me things of, tweak this, tweak that. I'm just blindly following everyone because I don't know what the hell I am doing.
Right.
And it wasn't, a year and a half later. So I'm a year and a half into my writers group. I'm a year and a half into edits with my best. This woman and I now become very good friends.
Mm-hmm.
She knows me better than just about anyone. I'm starting to realize that the writers group is not leading me in the right place. I'm starting to get really tired of I would use that word, and this instead of this one. And I'm thinking, whatever. But there was one person in this group that I didn't particularly care for. She was not even a writer. She just showed up and critiqued everyone.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Oh yeah. So I'm starting to get a little more confidence in my writing, right? And so one day I read a particular section of a very embarrassing moment that I had when I flew to Alaska, which was only my second plane trip in my life, and had all of this luggage. I'm spending a whole summer in Alaska, so I had all of this luggage, and I had no way to carry it between gates when I was changing planes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, porter came up and said, "Oh, let me do this for you." So he loads all my luggage, and so when he gets me to the gate where I need to be, he's like, he holds his palm. I'm like, I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't have any money. All I had were traveler's checks.
Right.
So I'm telling this part of the story, and her comment was, "I can't believe you were that stupid."
Oh my gosh.
And I went home and thought, I am not going back.
Wow.
And I didn't go back, and everyone else was like, "Why aren't you?" I said, "You know what? Thank you for all of the help you've given me for the past 18 months, but I think I can handle this on my own." And that's when I dove in and rewrote my book. And that's when I started getting offers.
Wow.
It was one of those wake up of, why do I need these people? I actually realized I know more than they do.
You moved past them.
I moved past them.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things that we do in the Creative Academy, which is a writing school and publishing school where I teach, is encourage people to start talking about their books early before they get them published. And you did that how did that feel to talk about this before you even really had formulated that this was a book?
Because they asked me just about my life as a firefighter, and when I was speaking in front of both, I've spoken in front of 3 women's groups really early. I just kind of told them, well, this is who I was and this is what I did. And they would, so I had opened up for questions, and they're like, why in the world would you ever want to do such a thing? And I said, well, I don't know. I just thought it would be really interesting. And actually there's a book behind the book, because I am working on a prequel of how I ended up doing this.
So what led you before you were 19 to wanting to be a
To
forest
wanting to be a
firefighter?
firefighter. So there was a lot of, there was a lot of, Q&A about, what possessed you to do this? And then there was a lot of, well, how was it working with all men? And I said, well, some of them were fine and some of them were not. I handled the men on the crew okay that gave me a hard time, because I just gave them a hard time back. But it was when I got to the overhead, when I was actually denied jobs because I was a woman. And I was told to my face that I was denied jobs because we don't hire women here. And this was after EEO. And I'm just like, well, you can't say that. And they're like, well, prove it.
Wow. So wait, tell me what EEO is.
Equal Employment Opportunity Act.
Okay, so an American
And I filed complaints, and I was blacklisted for doing that.
Of course you were, yeah.
Yeah, so but I continue. But the thing that I've learned in the past year, Don, is that I have realized I've never been a social media person. Facebook, not interested. Email, barely, And I have in the past year connected with a wonderful array of people. I've met people all over the world and I don't tell them, oh, I wrote this book, I can't wait for you to read it. I don't say a word about my book. I just connect with people. And then when they find out I've written a book, some will ask me what it's about. And when I tell them, oh my gosh, I want to read this. And I think, well, that's great. Thank you. But I realized that you don't advertise your book by telling people, I wrote this, now you can buy it. That's not it. And when people get to know you, they're going to want to know what you're about. Yeah. And I've had this wonderful year meeting people all over the world who have already pre-ordered my book just because they know me and think that this is just really cool. They said, we want to know what happened. We want to know all about you. And I was like, because I really can't believe this. I still can't believe that people want to know. And I'm delighted that they do, because what I did, I know was unusual, but yet I still don't get why it should be.
Right. So when I was I wasn't a forest, I was a volunteer firefighter in a community. So I did 5 years of service, and we had 2 forest fires in those 5 years. I was in my 40s at the time. I retired right when I turned 50. Now, you were doing this though in which years? So that for me was in the 2010 to 2015. You were doing this
1976 to 1982.
Very different time.
Very different. Yeah. In fact, the 1970s, so 1976, and actually I've actually met people on Facebook that are, and one woman in particular who is single-handedly documenting all of the women. She's looking for everyone who has ever worked for the Forest Service as a firefighter or worked for the Forest Service as a woman. And she's documenting their life. Wow. And compiling what she calls an oral history of women in firefighting. And I found her on Facebook and we interviewed, and she said, I'm one of the earliest people that she's found.
That's amazing.
And I know, because I worked with a woman who told me that she started in 75. So so I know it's earlier, but I'm following her posts and I see women responding of, oh yeah, I started in 86 and 89. And I'm like, I did not think about it then. I had no clue. But I should have known, because in 76, my first summer, I was sent to a conference for the Federal Women's Program, which had just started that year. And that was to help women adapt to working in a man's world. I didn't know that's what it was. They were talking about assertiveness training and sensitivity training for the men. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I tried to find out more about the Federal Women's Program, which was very active in the 70s. They still exist, but I couldn't get them to respond to a single email. And the whole goal of them was to make sure that women were not being mistreated or discriminated against, and that they, and all of this, and it's just kind of like evaporated. And I look at, it's been what, 40 years and nothing has changed. I'm like, and I actually, the woman that is compiling the oral history project, she worked for she's retired Forest Service. She actually worked for them for quite a long time and retired from them. And she'd never heard of the Federal Women's Program. Really? And yet, because if you Google it, it comes up, and you can actually go to their website and you can actually say, contact this person who will never respond. But she didn't even know who they were. And I said, well, that's how I learned how to file an EEO complaint. It has not changed much. I'm still reading articles of women who are in the field, and they are being raped. They are being ridiculed and demeaned. And that's the part that upsets me the most, is that I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on here.
Yeah.
Why aren't men who are in their 20s respecting women more in a role that they can do this job? They've been doing this job for 40 years.
Yeah.
And then some.
Back to the process of writing your book. You had mentioned there were a number of times you had to walk away because you were dealing with stuff that was too hard to deal with all at once or for periods of time. How did you have a particular writing habit that, like, for instance, you wrote 1,000 words a day, or you made sure that you got a certain part done before you allowed yourself to step away? How did you make it happen? Because so many people will start and then abandon partway through. What was it that kept you coming back?
A lot of it was the fact that I was unemployed through much of this time, and I had the time, but I was very dedicated to it too. I wanted to tell the story, and I wanted to tell the story right, and whatever it took, I was going to do that. And I knew all the agent rejections, yes, they hurt, and they'd make me pause for days or maybe a week. But then I'd realize, no, I'm not done with this. So when I would take a break, I would go work on something else. I still work on the book, but I would move to a different section and then make a note, go back to page whatever. I was in therapy at the time, and I would go to my therapist and I tell her, I'm in this section and it hurts and I don't want to write this. And she said, well, you don't have to do that right now. And when I let myself go with, you don't have to, eventually I would realize, and it was usually through editing, that I would get back to that section and I take a deep breath and think, okay, here we go. I'm here. And I would just kind of close my eyes, put myself in the place where I was at the time, write whatever came out, and just keep on going. And then I would go back and make sure that I didn't have a gazillion typos or whatever. Yeah. And think, you can go back to this later. You don't have to do this right now. And giving myself the permission to not have to made me want to. You know what I'm saying? As soon as you tell yourself you have to do that,
the wall will go up.
Yeah, now they can. So, but I would write every day, and my best writing time is usually from 3 to 4, because I'm also self-employed, and so I would do all my work during the day. And between 3 and 4, I allowed myself a glass of wine and writing time. And I would write until I started to get tired and I'd quit. And then I'd go back the next day and in the morning before I would start my work, take a look at it and see how terrible it was. Because you know how that goes. It's like, oh, this is great. This is great. And then you look at it the next day, this is terrible.
Sometimes there's good. So Anne Lamott, I believe it was Anne Lamott in Bird by Bird, wrote about your shitty first draft, right? She says, give yourself permission to write that shitty first draft. Did you have that attitude as well, that you could just do that?
Well, I would tell myself that you're going to write something great, and then I knew it was shitty the next day. Because I was going to go, oh God, what were you thinking? But I also learned that, I think it was Hemingway that said, uh, write drunk, edit sober.
That's
Not that
right.
I write drunk, but the glass of wine did help me relax a little, and not worry so much about what I was writing. And my dear friend Joanne, who became my editor and the retired English teacher, every now and then we would talk on the phone regularly, and she'd say, so I'd be telling her about a particular section. I'd say, and so I'm telling her all about it, and she says, damn it, write that.
Did you ever do that? Did you ever like just speak your story?
Yes, and I tried. I carried a tape recorder on my walks. I always carried a piece of paper and a pen in my pocket when I went hiking, because something would come to me, and it's like, oh, and I'd write it down. I would get all the time, and I actually record. I used to, when I was working on my book, I would actually read sections into the tape recorder and play them back. But what really helped was when I'd be telling a friend something and I'd realize, keep that voice. Because when I would try to put it on paper, I would make it formal sound. It's like,
Yeah.
and Joanne was always pointing that out. She says, when you tell me this on the phone, it's great. And when you write it down, you're narrating it,
Yeah.
and it's boring. And so I try to always think about what she says to me, of how I would tell someone this if they were sitting in front of me, or I was on the phone with my best friend saying, and you can't believe, or this, this happened, and good grief, this was just an absolutely unbelievable thing, and damn it, and all of that. So the voice completely changed when I realized I'm going to just relay this about, I don't care. I was so worried about the way it was written, and I thought, I threw that out.
It's so funny.
You're right.
I've been working on a memoir. There, I've said it for many, many, many years. And there are drafts that are living under my bed that will never see the light of day. And there are periods that I go through being so earnest, and I'm not an earnest person. Like I don't think I've ever had an earnest conversation, but I get into these spaces of writing, and when I read it back, it's like, who in the world was writing that? That is not me. And I think there's a protection or something there. I haven't figured that piece out yet. And so I've actually put quotes up on the wall that are quotes or reviews from other people's books that have written funny memoirs, and that are, difficult subjects, but they're done in a way that makes you laugh. And I've taken those quotes and put my name and my book title in there to remind myself, this is not earnest. But it's a funny thing how we do that.
It is. And of course, between all of my writing, I read as many memoirs as I can get my hands on. Some of them are terrible. So I tell myself, so what is it in here that you would never do?
Yeah.
Why? Why do you not like this? Because those are just as good as reading the ones that you do like.
Yeah.
Because it tells you, I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
You learn a lot from that. And then focusing on what is it. I had to remind myself, and I would say, when you see the major changes, so one of the major challenges, yes, was dealing with my ex, but the other one, from taking my story from the one that was getting rejected to the one that all of a sudden got interest, was realize, and I knew this, it was just trying to figure out how to do it. It was not telling people what happened to me, but showing how what happened to me made me me.
So it was your journey that was
and I read somewhere about inhabit the moment, the show versus tell. And I also participate in a lot of beginning writers groups on Facebook and try to help people who are trying to figure out what to do. And they say, I don't get the show, don't tell. And I tell them, inhabit the moment, be there. You are there. What do you see, smell, taste, feel? And if you describe all of that, you've just shown it.
Yeah.
And whenever I was stuck on something, whenever I'd get to a section and I'd think, this is dull, or why don't I like this? And then I'd look at my inhabit the moment thinking, oh, because I'm not.
Right.
inhabiting the moment.
Right.
When I got the edits back from the publisher, commas, that,
Oh.
that's pretty much all she got were the commas. I hate commas. Still don't get them. But I also had not touched this book for a year. So she said, if you want to make any changes, now's your chance. Oh my God. I went in there and I spent 7 days, probably 8 hours a day thinking, this is my chance. I want this to, there are sections that don't work for me. And I had to step back and think, some of these sections are just in there because they've been in there from day one. I don't like them. Gone, done, rewrote them.
Wow.
And I am so happy and so pleased because my writing skills have definitely improved. I've written another book since I
so
got the contract. So
that's fabulous. That's another thing. Like setting the book aside, a whole year is a long time to set it aside.
Is. And I was afraid. I was really afraid when they gave it to me. I thought, so what are you going to do? You're going to rewrite the whole thing? And I thought, no, there's parts that I'm perfectly okay with. But every now and then something would hit me, and I had a little notebook. Okay, yes, revisit that part, because I'd think about that, and I think, yeah, I think I want to look at that again. But as I read through the whole thing, it all came to me. It was like, I know what I want to say. Oh, and the parts about my ex that I put place markers in, pitch the place markers, and realize this is exactly how I felt. And I was able to go there.
So in May, this book comes out, and when is the prequel coming out? Do you know?
Well, I haven't shared that with my publisher yet because I'm still tweaking, and one step at a time. But I am I've had beta readers read this, and it's completely different from the first one. And in fact, the wonderful man that read the one that I told you that gave me the great feedback, when he finished it, he gave me what I think I might ask the publisher to put on the back cover. He gave me a quote. He said, I'll have to admit that when I got to the end, I felt a little teary because I realized that I was no longer going to visit this new friend that I'd met in this book. And it was really sweet.
So lovely.
And so he read book 2. And he said, this is probably something that I never would have read, but I could not put it down. And I've never met this guy.
Oh, this isn't someone who is actually in your real life writing group?
No, we met online. I don't even remember which writing group, but we met online.
Oh, that's fabulous.
It is, and it's really, and the other beta readers, they said, I'm 17 when I start this story. It's completely different, but I really like it. I mean, I really like it. Shows the decision making and how I go back and forth between learning about what is love and I know I want more than just a job.
Yeah.
I just know it in my heart. I don't want to wait on tables. I don't want to be a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And I stumble on this Forest Service job, and I realize I want this. I really want this.
It sounds, despite the fact that it's 40 years ago, it sounds just as relevant to a 17-year-old young woman today.
Yeah, it's exactly, because we all go through this of trying to find out who we are and what love is and what we want to do with our life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what really struck me when I was reading my journals as I was putting this together was that before I end up working in Alaska, before I end up working in Durango, Colorado, I'm writing about, I want to go to Alaska. I think I want to go. I'd love to go to Durango, Colorado.
Get out. Like, really? So you...
Yes! And I went there. It was just, I know, it was like, oh my gosh. It was, and I knew. It was like, how did I know?
That's great. Well, you created it. You manifested that. I don't know. That's really neat. It makes me regret not having kept journals. I, I suppose I can
That's
start.
another thing that I tell you, anyone that will listen, any young woman that will listen, write it down.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did that, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely. What last piece of advice would you want to leave to an author who has a storyteller who has a memoir in her or him and is just at that place where they're, they're not sure if they're going to go forward or just toss it, give it up?
I say, I mean, and this is a tough one because it depends on what do you want out of this? You know, do you want to, because like I said, when I started my first one, it was just, I just wanted to get it down. You know, I thought, oh, all my firefighting years, they were fun. I had a lot of, a lot of challenging things. And then it started getting into, oh no, I was the first woman on a fire crew. Oh, that's interesting. And then it got to, oh no, but no, I was really challenged with a lot of things. So knowing your goal of what you want to have in your end result is important. And that'll kind of give you an indicator of how far do I want to take this. But I still say write it down, because that 90 pages that mine started out with that ended up at 450, that got backed off to 387, then you're going to know, because you're going to see how it's going to form and whether or not you feel like, do you want to share this, and how do you want to share it? Where do you want to share it? Is this going to stay in your family? Is it going to be your personal thing? Do you
So
want to publish
the first step is
traditionally,
just write it
self-publish?
down. I guess that's
But
what
get
you're
it
saying,
down.
right? Just get it down.
Get it down. Get your story down. And get down. I guess our talk today just completely ties in with a guest post that I just finished yesterday. And that was, if your goal is to just vent, say you want to vent about a really rough time in your life, or you hate your ex or whatever, that's venting. That's not going to get you published unless you self-publish. But no one's going to read that. Nobody wants to read somebody just trashing, that person was a horrible person and I hated my life and I hate them. And that's, just get that out.
Yeah.
Get rid of that. But if there's a story in there of how you grew and became stronger, a better person, move forward, whatever, that's the story you want to tell. Not the one about, yeah, I want to make sure that they know I hate their guts.
Right.
That's not one you want to share.
Yeah.
That's for you.
Time creates that ability for us to actually reflect back and see what the journey is, as opposed to be living in that anger or that revenge space, right?
Right. And the other thing that really helps is when you get stuck, sometimes you just got to walk away. And sometimes, a day or two is not enough. I mean, it may be really hard to walk away for weeks or a month, and then it may be even harder to go back. But for me, I never gave up on my story. I mean, I always knew I was going to finish this, and I was going to tell this story. And I knew that the more time away from it, your perspective changes,
Mm-hmm.
and you get past whatever it was that's got you stuck of, well, I really want to say this, but maybe I don't, or I'm not sure how to say this, and you're digging inside and can't figure it out. But I found, especially for me, and I've read that actually this is true physiologically, is that you do think better when you're physically active.
Mm-hmm.
I come up with my most creative problem solving when I'm hiking or swimming or walking. That's why I carry, swimming is hard. It's hard to write things down. But hiking and walking, it's the tape recorder or a piece of paper and a pencil of write that down, because guaranteed I'll forget when I get home. Or I wake up in the middle of the night. I have a pad of paper and a pencil next to my bed.
What a treat. Thank you. As we were talking, as you were sharing, I can't tell you how many times in my head I was going, oh, pull quote. Oh, this is brilliant. Like, there's so much value in what you shared today, Linda. It's just, It's just amazing. So I thank you so much
Oh,
for
thank
sharing.
you. I really
And
appreciate this opportunity.
yeah, I look forward to being in touch once this book comes out, and also hearing about the second one, the prequel to it. It sounds
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
all good.
Been great talking with you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Donna.
Bye.